Alara Holloway had been standing over the kitchen island with her laptop open like a shield, not because she was afraid of her husband, but because she was tired of fighting with air. The kind of tired that doesn't sleep off. The kind that comes from watching someone you once respected start treating every room like a stage and every conversation like an inconvenience. Benedict walked in wearing that new confidence he had been practicing lately, phone in hand, tie loosened like he'd conquered something, not negotiated it. He didn't greet her properly. He barely looked at the pot simmering on the stove. He went straight for the fridge like the house existed to serve him. Alara waited until he shut the door before she spoke, her voice already sharpened by the message she'd read 10 minutes ago from a legal contact asking, again, if Benedict would confirm the investor call time. "You missed another call," she said, tapping the screen so the notification lit up again. Benedict didn't even pretend to care. He poured water into a glass slowly, like the world was moving at his pace now. "I was busy," he replied, and the words landed lazy and dismissive, the exact tone that made Alara's nerves flare. She didn't do small talk. She didn't do gentle hints. Busy doing what, Benedict? Because it can't be reading the documents. That's not your hobby. His head turned sharply then, offended not by what she said, but by the fact she dared to say it like she had the right. Benedict set the glass down with a controlled clink, a sound that tried to be calm, but carried threat the way polished knives do. "You're doing that thing again," he said. "That thing where you act like you're smarter than everyone in the room." Alara stepped closer, palms flat on the counter, leaning forward like a woman about to cross-examine her own marriage. "If you've suddenly become allergic to truth, just say it," she shot back. "Because I'm not the one walking around like a deal that hasn't even been signed is already a crown." Benedict scoffed, rolling his eyes as if she were jealous, as if jealousy was the only language he understood women could speak. Alara hated that. Hated that he had reduced her to a stereotype in his mind so he wouldn't have to take her seriously. "I'm trying to protect you," she continued, voice rising. "This isn't a game. When people bring $5 million to the table, they don't do it because they like your smile. They do it because there are structures, signatories, controls, things you keep pretending don't exist." Benedict leaned against the counter opposite her, arms crossed, letting his silence mock her. "I knew it," he said finally. "You can't stand that something big is happening for me." Alara laughed, a sharp sound that held no joy. "Something big is happening, yes. But not for you alone. And the fact you can't tell the difference is why you keep walking into traps with your eyes open." The argument might have stayed within the normal boundaries of married frustration, raised voices, bruised pride, cold shoulders, if Benedict hadn't said the one thing that exposed the rot underneath. "You've always been like this," he snapped. "Always trying to control everything. Always trying to," he searched for a word that would wound, "manage me." Alara's eyebrows lifted. "Manage you," she repeated, incredulous. "Benedict, I married a man, not a project. But lately you've been acting like a boy who just discovered applause." His jaw tightened. The air between them went dense. He pointed a finger at her laptop. "Don't act like you're the reason this is happening," he said. "I did the work. I made the calls." Alara slapped the counter, hard enough to make the spoon beside the stove jump. "And I read the contracts you refuse to read. I catch the clauses you don't even notice. I follow up the meetings you conveniently forget. So don't stand there and talk to me like I'm a spectator in my own home." Benedict's phone buzzed again. He glanced down, a quick flicker of a smile tugging at his mouth, too quick to be innocent. Alara saw it. She saw the way his face softened at the screen in a way it hadn't softened at her in weeks. Her voice dropped, deadly clear. "Who is that?" Benedict locked the screen and shoved the phone into his pocket. "Nobody," he said too fast. Alara stepped around the island, blocking his path like a gate. "Say it again," she demanded. "Nobody." Alara's eyes narrowed. "Then you won't mind opening it." And for the first time that night, Benedict looked truly angry, because he understood she wasn't asking as a wife anymore. She was asking as someone who had started keeping records. Alara didn't let the moment die the way softer women might, by turning away, swallowing suspicion, convincing themselves peace was worth more than clarity. She followed Benedict out of the kitchen and into the hallway, her bare feet silent on the tiles, her voice not silent at all. "We're not doing that thing where you act offended, so we forget what just happened," she said. Benedict stopped near the living room, turning with a glare that suggested she was the problem for noticing his lies. "Ilara, I'm not in the mood," he snapped. "Oh, now you're suddenly delicate," she fired back. "You can throw your ego around all week, but the minute I ask a question, you're not in the mood?" Benedict ran a hand through his hair, exasperated, and tried to walk past her. Ilara stepped in front of him again. "Sit," she ordered, pointing at the couch like she was addressing an employee who'd failed compliance. Benedict stared at her. "Are you serious?" Ilara's eyes flashed. "Dead serious. Because I got another message from the legal contact. They've been trying to confirm who the authorized signatory is for days, and you keep ghosting them. So I'm asking you now in plain language, who is funding this deal, Benedict? Who is signing? Who controls the holding structure?" Benedict laughed without humor. "Listen to you. You sound like my lawyer." Ilara leaned forward. "No. I sound like the only adult in this house." Benedict finally sat, but not because he respected her, because he wanted to end the noise. He crossed his legs like a man pretending he was in control, and Ilara hated how comfortable he looked in that posture. She grabbed a folder from the side table, papers she had printed earlier when she realized the emails were being ignored. "Here," she said, dropping it on his lap. "Open it. Read it. Start with the last 2 pages." Benedict didn't move. "Why are you acting like this is your business?" he asked. Ilara blinked slowly, then smiled in disbelief. "My business?" she repeated. "You mean the business that determines whether we keep our home, whether your name stays clean, whether people sue you into dust if you misrepresent ownership? That business." She sat across from him, elbows on knees, voice steady but fierce. "I'm not asking for permission to care, Benedict. I'm telling you there are details you're ignoring, and I will not sit and watch you embarrass yourself and drag me down with you." Benedict flipped open the folder with theatrical annoyance and skimmed the first page like he was reading a menu. Ilara slapped his hand. "Not like that," she snapped. "Read it properly." Benedict's eyes shot up. "Don't touch me," he warned. Ilara leaned in, unflinching. "Then stop treating this like a joke." The deeper he went, the more his attention tried to escape the words. He kept jumping sections, skipping paragraphs, hunting for easy summaries. Ilara watched him with a kind of disappointment that turns into fury. "There," she said, pointing. "That clause. It says the investor consortium reserves the right to remove the appointed executive if there's a credibility concern." Benedict scoffed. "And?" Ilara's laugh was sharp. "And you're out here lying about who controls the funds, ignoring calls, moving like a man already celebrating. Do you know what credibility concern means in real life? It means one whisper from the wrong person can end you." Benedict tossed the folder aside. "You're being dramatic," he said. Ilara stood up so fast the cushion bounced. "No, you're being careless. And since you don't respect caution, let's try shame. Benedict, you don't even know who owns the money behind this deal, do you?" His mouth tightened. "Of course I do." Ilara folded her arms. "Name them." Benedict hesitated, a small pause that screamed louder than any confession. Ilara's eyes widened, as if she'd just caught the whole marriage cheating. "Wow," she breathed. "So you're out here acting like a king, and you don't even know who built the throne." Benedict stood too, anger flushing his face. "I don't have to explain every detail to you," he barked. Ilara stepped closer, voice like a whip. "You do when those details can destroy us. And if you won't explain, I'll find out myself." Naira Vale had the kind of confidence that wasn't born from peace. It was born from hunger and victory fantasies. She sat in the corner of a glossy lounge with 2 friends, holding her phone like it was a mirror she couldn't stop admiring, her laughter loud enough to turn heads. "I'm telling you," she said, tapping her nails against her glass, "the moment the signing is done, everything changes. People only respect you when you stand next to money." Her friends giggled, leaning in, hungry for gossip the way people lean toward fire. Naira loved that. She loved being the center. She loved saying another woman's name like it was already history. His wife. Naira scoffed, rolling her eyes dramatically. She's the type that thinks loyalty is a personality. The kind that cooks, prays, and believes a man will suddenly develop sense because she stood by him. She smirked, biting the straw. Meanwhile, I'm the one who understands ambition. I don't hold him back with all that morals talk. One friend hesitated. But they're married. Naira laughed louder. Married doesn't mean permanent. It just means she got there first. And being first doesn't matter when you're no longer needed. She lifted her phone and showed them a blurred photo, Benedict's hand on her waist, his watch gleaming like proof. See this? This is my season. That house? That life? It's about to be mine. Across town, Benedict sat in his car outside the lounge, staring at Alara's name on his screen like it was an enemy calling for battle. He ignored it. Then he ignored it again. When Naira slid into the passenger seat, perfume and confidence filling the air, she didn't ask how his day was. She asked the only question she cared about. Did you handle her? Benedict sighed. She's starting again. Papers. Calls. Noise. Naira's lips curled. Of course she is, she said, leaning back. Women like that can smell replacement like smoke. They start performing panic. Benedict rubbed his forehead, trying to pretend he wasn't rattled. Naira reached over, traced his jaw lightly, not romance possession. Listen, she said. You've spent too long letting her talk to you like you're her student. You're not. You're about to be a new man. And new men don't beg old wives for permission. Benedict looked at her. She said something about investors, he admitted. About signatories. Naira scoffed as if paperwork was beneath her. Signatories? Benedict, please. The only signature that matters is yours, because you're the face. You're the one they want. Benedict's shoulders loosened under her flattery like a knot being untied. Naira smiled, satisfied. And if she keeps pushing, Naira continued, voice turning cold, then you push back harder. Pack her things. Tell her the truth. Let her cry. Let her shout. Either way, she'll leave. By the time Benedict and Naira arrived near the house, the mood had shifted into something reckless. Naira didn't walk behind him like a secret. She walked beside him like a trophy. She adjusted her hair at the gate, straightened her dress, and said, if she makes a scene, let her. People only believe who looks confident. Benedict hesitated, suddenly aware that this wasn't just cheating, it was war. Maybe we should slow down, he muttered. Naira turned sharply. Slow down, she repeated. After all your big talk? After all the promises you made me? Benedict, don't become small now. She leaned in, eyes hard. You told me you were done living like a man who apologizes for breathing. Prove it. Benedict swallowed. The gate opened. Lights glowed inside. And Naira smiled like someone entering a house she had already renamed in her head. Alara was not the kind of woman who waited for rumors to become reality. She didn't sit at home asking strangers on the internet if she was overthinking. She didn't watch her marriage crumble politely. She moved. The next afternoon, after another unanswered call from Benedict, she drove straight to the address she'd confirmed through a friend who worked in property management, an address tied to Benedict's late meetings. The lounge was bright, airy, filled with people who dressed like their lives were already sponsored. Alara walked in wearing simple, sharp clothing and an expression that made it clear she didn't come to sip cocktails. She scanned the room once, like a hawk, then spotted them, Benedict and Naira, at a table near the window. Naira was laughing, head thrown back, touching Benedict's arm like she owned it. Benedict looked relaxed in a way he hadn't looked with Alara in months. Alara's chest tightened, but not with heartbreak. With rage. The kind that clears your vision. She walked straight to their table. No dramatic pause. No trembling hands. She stopped beside Naira first, because Naira was the one smiling. So you're the reason my husband has developed sudden courage, Alara said, voice calm in volume, but violent in meaning. Naira turned slowly, eyes sweeping Alara up and down with arrogant amusement. And you must be the wife, Naira replied, smiling wider. I expected. Older. Alara let out a short laugh. And I expected. Shame, she shot back. Benedict stood abruptly, chair scraping. Alara, not here, he warned. Alara snapped her head toward him. Not here, she repeated. So there are places where betrayal is allowed and places where it's not. People nearby began to glance over. Naira enjoyed the attention like sunlight. She leaned back in her chair, crossing her legs. Benedict, you didn't tell me she'd be this loud, she said, as if Alara wasn't standing there. Alara's eyes narrowed. Loud is what happens when someone refuses to be erased quietly, she replied, then turned to Naira. Let me be clear, you can sit in my marriage like it's a seat you purchased, but don't get comfortable. Because whatever story he sold you, I promise you, I am not the woman you think you're dealing with. Benedict tried to take Alara's arm. She jerked away. Don't touch me, she hissed. The words were low, but the heat behind them turned heads. You don't get to parade this woman and then tell me where I'm allowed to speak. Benedict's face tightened with embarrassment. You're making a scene, he muttered. Alara's laugh was bitter. Oh, now you care about scenes, she said, voice rising. Where was your dignity when you were hiding in apartments and lounges? Naira smirked. He's not hiding anymore, she said sweetly. That's the whole point. Alara turned sharply toward Naira. You're so proud, Alara said. It's almost impressive. Naira lifted her chin. I'm proud because I'm winning, she replied. Alara stepped closer, eyes blazing. No, Alara corrected. You're proud because you're counting money that hasn't touched your hand. And you're celebrating a deal you don't understand. Benedict flinched. Naira's smile faltered for half a second. Alara saw it and pressed harder. Ask him who controls the signing authority, Alara challenged, staring directly at Naira. Ask him who actually owns the funding vehicle behind that $5 million. Naira laughed quickly, trying to cover her uncertainty. Please, she scoffed. He told me everything. Alara's eyes cut to Benedict. Did you? She demanded. Benedict's silence was an answer. Alara nodded slowly, then leaned in close enough that Benedict could smell the certainty on her. You're going to regret ignoring me, she said. And it won't take long. That night, the house felt like it was holding its breath. Alara returned first, not to cry into pillows, but to gather the documents Benedict had refused to read, because she already knew what this confrontation would become. She laid the papers on the dining table like evidence. When the front door opened and Benedict stepped in, Naira stepped in too, no hesitation. No shame, no I'll wait in the car. Naira looked around the living room with bright eyes, as if she was touring a property listing. Nice, she said, dragging the word out. It has potential. Alara came out of the dining area immediately, shoulders squared, eyes locked. So you brought her here, Alara said, voice sharp. Benedict lifted his hands slightly, as if he was the victim of her reaction. Alara, don't start, he warned. Alara laughed, one hard sound. Don't start, she repeated. Benedict, you started when you walked into a lounge with her like you were auditioning for a new life. Naira smiled, stepping forward. You don't have to talk to him like that, Naira said, tone fake polite, eyes smug. Alara's gaze slid to Naira like a blade. And you don't have to talk at all in my house, Alara replied. Naira's smile widened. Your house, she echoed. That's funny. He told me. Alara cut her off instantly. He told you what? That he's the king here? That he's the one bringing $5 million. Alara pointed at the documents on the table. Since you like confidence, Naira, go ahead. Read those. Tell me whose name shows up where it matters. Benedict's face hardened, embarrassment turning into anger. Enough, he barked, stepping toward Alara. You're obsessed with paperwork because you don't understand real business. Alara stepped forward too, refusing to yield ground. I understand consequences, she fired back. And I understand you're acting like a man who thinks shouting can rewrite clauses. Naira laughed softly, mocking. She's threatened, she murmured. It's natural. Alara turned on her fully. Threatened. Alara snapped. You're sleeping with my husband, and you think the word for my reaction is threatened? No, darling. The word is offended. Because I don't compete for what is already mine. I correct it. Benedict's jaw clenched. I'm done with this, he said coldly. I'm done with your controlling attitude. I'm done with your constant suspicion. I'm done with you. Ilara stared at him, then smiled in disbelief. So this is your speech, she said. You rehearsed it with her? Benedict's eyes flickered, guilt, then defiance. Naira stepped closer to Benedict, linking her arm through his like a claim. He doesn't need to rehearse anything, she said proudly. He's finally choosing happiness. Ilara's voice rose, filling the room like thunder. Happiness? She shouted. Benedict, you're choosing ego. You're choosing a woman who claps for your delusions because she wants the reward. Benedict pointed toward the hallway. Pack your things, he ordered. Leave tonight. Ilara's eyes widened, not with fear, but fury. You're throwing me out? She demanded. In the same house I protected while you were busy collecting flattery? Naira smiled again, too pleased, too bold. 5 days, Naira said, voice dripping satisfaction. Give it 5 days, and you won't even recognize this place. Ilara's head snapped toward Naira. 5 days. Ilara repeated slowly, tasting the words like prophecy. She turned back to Benedict. Fine, she said, voice trembling with anger but not weakness. Throw me out. Bring your boastful trophy. Celebrate early. She jabbed a finger toward the papers. But remember this, Benedict Holloway. The signing will humble you. And when it does, don't come crawling back with apologies. Because I'm not the woman you discard and later retrieve. I am the woman who ends things properly. Benedict scoffed. Leave, he repeated. Ilara grabbed her bag, but as she walked toward the door, she turned back one last time, eyes blazing, voice loud enough that even Naira's smugness flinched. Read before you sign, Ilara warned. Or you'll freeze in front of people who don't forgive stupidity. Ilara did not leave the house like a woman fleeing defeat. She left like someone exiting a battlefield to reload. Her bag was light, but her mind was heavy with calculations, not grief. Outside, the night air slapped her awake, and instead of tears, anger steadied her spine. She didn't look back at the house, not because it didn't hurt, but because she refused to give Benedict the satisfaction of watching her hesitate. As she stepped into her car, her phone buzzed again. Another message from the legal contact. This time, she answered immediately. Proceed without him, Ilara said firmly. I'll handle representation myself. The relief on the other end was almost audible. For the first time that night, Ilara smiled, not because she was winning yet, but because the game had finally shifted into territory she controlled. Inside the house, Benedict paced like a man who had expected silence and received resistance instead. Naira watched him with a mix of triumph and irritation. You should feel relieved, she said, kicking off her shoes and wandering into the living room like she already owned it. No more lectures. No more paperwork sermons. Benedict nodded, but something in Ilara's last words clawed at him. Read before you sign. He pushed the thought away aggressively. Naira wrapped her arms around him from behind, whispering, 5 days, remember? That's all it takes. After that, she'll just be a story you tell people about how you almost stayed small. Benedict inhaled deeply, letting her certainty override his doubt. Across town, Ilara parked outside a modest hotel and sat still for a full minute before getting out. She wasn't crying. She was planning. She pulled out her laptop right there in the car, reviewing emails she had forwarded herself weeks ago, threads Benedict had ignored. She highlighted clauses, drafted messages, scheduled meetings. By the time she checked in, she had already sent 3 firm emails and requested a formal update on the signing timeline. If Benedict thought throwing her out ended the argument, he had misunderstood her entirely. Ilara wasn't done speaking. She was just changing the audience. Naira moved into the house the next morning with noise and intention. She didn't sneak. She didn't ask. She arrived with bags, opinions, and a camera already open. She filmed the living room, narrating cheerfully about new chapters and fresh starts, careful not to mention names, but careless enough to make the message clear. She tossed Ilara's remaining cushions aside, complaining about the colors, replacing them with her own brighter choices, like she was erasing a personality. Benedict watched from the doorway, telling himself this was what progress looked like. Naira laughed loudly, spun in the space, and said, "This place already feels lighter." The word lighter stung him, but he didn't challenge it. Meanwhile, Alara sat in a glass-walled office across the city, posture straight, voice unapologetic. She spoke directly to 2 investors and a legal advisor, laying everything bare: marital instability, miscommunication, misrepresentation. She did not paint herself as a victim. She painted Benedict as a liability. "I warned him repeatedly," she said evenly. "He chose arrogance over accuracy." The room didn't resist her. If anything, they leaned in. They had been waiting for someone competent to step forward. Alara requested that the final documents reflect the actual funding authority, without ambiguity. No delays. No drama. Just correction. That evening, Naira made another post, this time dressed in Alara's old robe, wine glass in hand, smiling like she had conquered something sacred. Alara saw it. She didn't block her. She forwarded the screenshot to her legal contact with one line, document timeline of asset occupation. Naira thought visibility was power. Alara knew documentation was. And every boast Naira made was quietly becoming evidence. Naira did not expect to see Alara again so soon, and definitely not where she did. When Alara walked into the upscale cafe, where Naira sat bragging to acquaintances about new beginnings, Naira's smile faltered before hardening into mockery. "Wow," Naira said loudly, standing halfway. "You really don't know when to let go." Alara didn't sit. She didn't greet. She placed her phone on the table, screen facing up. "I'm not here for closure," Alara said coolly. "I'm here to correct something you keep saying." Naira crossed her arms. "Oh." Alara leaned in just enough to command attention. "You keep referring to that deal as his." "It's not." Naira laughed too fast. "You're delusional," she replied. Benedict explained everything. Alara's eyebrow lifted. "Did he explain who signs?" she asked sharply. "Did he explain whose assets secure the risk?" Naira scoffed, but her eyes flicked away. Alara saw it and pressed harder. "Let me help you," Alara continued. "You're celebrating borrowed confidence. And when it expires, it won't hurt him alone." Naira stepped closer, voice rising. "You're just bitter because you lost." Alara smiled thinly. "I haven't lost anything yet. But you." She glanced at Naira's phone on the table. "You've already spent money you don't understand." The tension drew attention. People stared. Naira hated that Alara wasn't embarrassed. "He chose me," Naira snapped. Alara straightened. "He chose noise," she corrected. "And that's not the same thing." Without waiting for a response, Alara walked away, leaving Naira standing there unsettled, her confidence suddenly brittle. For the first time, Naira wondered if she had stepped into a story where she wasn't the final chapter. Benedict received the final document package that afternoon and did exactly what Alara predicted. He skimmed. He read the headings, admired the formatting, skipped the dense sections that required patience. When a call came in from the legal team asking him to confirm attendance and acknowledgement of authority, he brushed it off. "Everything's fine," he said confidently. "I'll be there." He didn't ask questions. He didn't open attachments. Naira watched him with approval. "See," she said. "That's confidence." Alara was always trying to scare you. Benedict nodded, wanting to believe her. Later that night, Alara sent one final message. It wasn't emotional. It wasn't pleading. It was precise. "If you sign without reading, you will be publicly corrected." Benedict stared at it longer than he meant to, irritation flaring. He typed a response, deleted it, then blocked her instead. "I'm done with threats," he muttered. Naira kissed his cheek. "Good," she said. "Because tomorrow, everything becomes official." Alara closed her laptop calmly after sending the message. She had done enough warning. From here on, consequences would speak. She prepared her folder for the signing, organized, indexed, indisputable. Whatever Benedict walked into the next day, it would not be confusion. It would be clarity. The conference room was pristine, intimidating in its quiet confidence. Investors arrived one by one, greeting Alara with nods of recognition and respect. She didn't smile excessively. She didn't boast. She simply took her seat at the table where her nameplate already waited. When Benedict entered minutes later with Naira trailing behind him, he expected dominance. What he felt instead was imbalance. The room did not rise for him. It did not bend. Naira squeezed his arm proudly, whispering, "Look at you." Ilara met his eyes briefly, not with anger, not with sadness, but with certainty. Documents were placed on the table. Pens aligned. The air thickened with formality. Benedict reached forward confidently, flipping pages until his fingers stopped. His face drained of color. Naira leaned in, confused. "What is it?" she whispered. Benedict didn't answer. He was staring at the final page, the signature block already filled, authority clearly stated. Ilara's name sat where his had always existed in his imagination. Ilara stood then, voice clear, unshaken. "Before we proceed," she said, addressing the room, "there's a correction that needs to be acknowledged." Benedict's throat tightened. Naira's smile slipped. The room turned toward Ilara. And in that moment, everything Benedict thought he owned began to collapse, quietly, professionally, and in front of witnesses. Ilara did not wait for permission to speak, because the room already recognized authority when it stood up. She rose calmly but decisively, one hand resting on the folder she had brought, the other relaxed at her side. Her voice cut through the tension without strain. "There seems to be some confusion," she began, eyes briefly flicking to Benedict before returning to the investors. "And since confusion delays business, I'll be direct." Benedict tried to clear his throat, tried to reposition himself in the chair like posture could restore power. But Ilara was already moving forward. She didn't shout. She didn't tremble. She spoke like someone who had rehearsed truth, not theatrics. Naira shifted beside Benedict, her earlier pride dimming as the attention of the room clearly favored Ilara. Ilara opened her folder and slid copies of documents across the table with controlled precision, explaining the funding structure, the trust ownership, and the holding company that had quietly backed the entire deal. She emphasized timelines, signatures, and prior communications that had gone unanswered. Mr. Holloway was introduced as a proposed executive representative, Ilara said, her tone firm but not cruel. Not the principal authority. The words landed heavily. One investor nodded slowly. Another adjusted his glasses and flipped through the pages. Benedict opened his mouth to speak, but Ilara raised a hand, not aggressively, but authoritatively. "Please," she said, "let me finish. I've spent weeks warning him. Publicly correcting this now is not revenge. It's damage control." Naira couldn't contain herself. "This is ridiculous," she burst out, voice sharp and defensive. "You're just doing this because he chose me." The room went quiet again, the kind of silence that isolates foolishness. Ilara turned to Naira slowly, eyes steady. "This room doesn't care who he sleeps with," Ilara said bluntly. "It cares who owns the money." Naira flushed, lips parting to respond, but no one looked at her. The investor's attention was locked on Ilara, and in that moment, Naira felt something unfamiliar, irrelevance. Benedict finally stood, chair scraping loudly against the floor in a way that drew attention for all the wrong reasons. "This is being exaggerated," he said, forcing confidence into his voice. "We're married. What's hers is mine. This is just internal conflict spilling into business." Ilara didn't even blink. "Marriage doesn't rewrite contracts," she replied immediately. "And disrespect doesn't transfer ownership." One of the investors cleared his throat. Another leaned back, arms folded, eyes assessing Benedict with new caution. Benedict felt it then, the shift. Not anger. Not hostility. Doubt. The most dangerous thing in a room full of money. He tried another angle, turning to the investors with a strained smile. "I've been the face of negotiations. I've built rapport. Surely that counts for something." Ilara let out a short, humorless laugh. "You built rapport on borrowed authority," she said. "And you ignored every instruction that would have protected that rapport." She looked around the table. "I have records of missed calls, unread documents, and repeated warnings. I will not allow this deal to collapse because one man mistook flattery for control." The words stung because they were clean factual and impossible to argue without looking foolish. Naira reached for Benedict's arm, whispering urgently, "Say something. Don't let her do this." Benedict looked at her, and for the first time, didn't find reassurance there. He found panic. The investors began conferring quietly among themselves, low murmurs carrying the sound of a decision forming without him. Ilara remained standing, unbothered, her posture communicating something Benedict had never understood until now, that true power didn't rush, didn't beg, and didn't need to shout to dominate a room. The lead investor finally spoke, voice measured and firm. "Based on the documentation presented," he said, looking directly at Ilara, "we recognize you as the authorized principal and controlling signatory." He turned to Benedict briefly. "Your role as proposed is subject to revision." The word revision echoed like a verdict. Benedict's mouth opened, but nothing came out. Naira stiffened beside him, her earlier confidence draining fast. Ilara nodded once, acknowledging the confirmation, then sat down, not retreating, but concluding her point. Ilara didn't stop there. "For clarity," she continued, "the deal will proceed under transparent authority. Any executive role offered to Mr. Holloway will be conditional and contractual, not assumed." She turned to Benedict then, eyes sharp. "You may stay involved if you accept structure and accountability, or you may step aside." The room waited. This wasn't a personal moment. It was professional judgment unfolding in real time. Naira snapped. "You can't just take everything from him," she shouted. This was supposed to be his moment. Ilara turned fully toward her now, voice colder. "Moments don't override ownership," she said. "And if you had spent less time celebrating and more time understanding, you wouldn't be shocked right now." Security shifted slightly near the door, not because violence was expected, but because disruption was no longer tolerated. Naira realized then that her voice no longer mattered here. The stage she thought she was standing on had never been hers. Outside the conference room, Naira finally let her frustration explode. "You let her humiliate you," she accused Benedict, pacing aggressively. "You promised me everything." Benedict said nothing, his face pale, his confidence stripped raw. The silence only enraged her more. "Say something," she demanded. "Fight back." Benedict rubbed his temples, the weight of reality crashing down on him in waves. "There's nothing to fight," he muttered. "She owns it." The words tasted bitter. Naira froze. "What do you mean she owns it?" she whispered. The truth hit her like a delayed slap. All the bragging, all the planning, all the imagined luxury, gone. Naira's voice rose, shrill with disbelief. "So I embarrassed myself for nothing?" Benedict didn't answer. He couldn't. She laughed then, not amused, but furious. "You let me talk. You let me post. You let me believe." She shoved his shoulder. "You're weak." Benedict flinched, not from the shove, but from the accuracy. Inside, Ilara finalized procedural next steps with the investors, unbothered by the noise outside. Her phone buzzed with a message notification from her lawyer, confirming readiness to proceed with personal matters as well. Ilara exhaled slowly. The business was handled. Now came closure. Ilara didn't ambush Benedict with emotion. She met him later that evening in a neutral space, her lawyer seated beside her, documents already prepared. Benedict arrived alone. Naira hadn't followed. The room was quiet, formal, stripped of drama, except the kind that comes from final decisions. "This isn't about punishment," Ilara said clearly. "It's about separation." She slid the divorce papers across the table without hesitation. "You crossed lines that can't be uncrossed. I warned you." Repeatedly. Benedict stared at the documents like they might dissolve if ignored. "We can still talk," he said weakly. "We can fix this." Ilara shook her head once. "You didn't break this in one moment," she replied. "You broke it every time you dismissed me, every time you chose ego over partnership." Her voice did not waver. "I'm not fighting to stay married to someone who only listens when consequences arrive." The lawyer spoke briefly, outlining terms. "Fair, clean, final." As Benedict signed, his hand trembled, not from loss of money, but from the realization that he had underestimated the wrong person. Ilara stood once more, gathering her things. "This ends here," she said. Not quietly. Properly. She walked out without looking back, leaving Benedict seated with the echo of his own decisions and the knowledge that the woman he tried to discard had not only outgrown him, but outmaneuvered him. The next morning, the city moved as if nothing monumental had happened, but Benedict felt like the ground beneath him had shifted permanently. He sat alone in his car outside the office building where he used to walk in with confidence, staring at the entrance like it belonged to another life. His phone buzzed, not with congratulations, not with investor calls, but with a formal email confirming his revised status. Conditional engagement subject to performance review. The words were polite, devastating, and irreversible. He read them twice, then a third time, as if repetition might soften their meaning. They didn't. He was no longer central. He was optional. Inside the building, Alara was already deep into work. She chaired a follow-up meeting with the same sharp clarity she displayed the day before, addressing timelines, deliverables, and accountability structures with precision. There was no trace of personal drama in her voice, no hint that the man being discussed was once her husband. When Benedict's name came up, she referred to him professionally, neutrally, as one would reference a tool rather than a partner. The investors took notes, nodded, and moved forward. Momentum favored competence, not sentiment. Alara's decisiveness didn't just stabilize the deal, it strengthened it. When Benedict finally walked in later, eyes lowered, posture subdued, he felt the shift immediately. Conversations didn't pause for him. No one turned eagerly. He was greeted politely, distantly, like someone whose relevance had expired quietly overnight. Alara didn't look at him. She didn't need to. Her authority was now structural, not performative. Benedict realized then that humiliation wasn't loud. It was being present and unnecessary at the same time. Naira had never believed in silence as punishment. She believed in confrontation, in loud exits and sharper words. But when Benedict stopped answering her calls that afternoon, her confidence began to crack. She drove to the house she had claimed loudly online, the house she had filmed like a trophy, and found it empty in a way that felt different. Not peaceful. Abandoned. The lights were off. The air felt cold. She walked through the rooms, touching the walls as if they might reassure her, but all she felt was exposure. She opened her phone, scrolling through her own posts, the comments now shifting in tone, less admiration, more curiosity, more doubt. When Benedict finally returned hours later, he didn't bring explanations or apologies. He brought exhaustion. Naira exploded immediately, accusing him of embarrassment, of weakness, of deception. "You let me look foolish," she shouted. "You let me believe we were untouchable." Benedict didn't shout back. He sat heavily on the couch, rubbing his face. "You believed what you wanted," he said quietly. The words stunned her more than yelling would have. Naira laughed sharply. "So that's it?" she demanded. "You lose one room, and suddenly I'm optional?" Benedict looked up at her then, eyes hollow. "This was never your room," he said. "I just let you think it was." The silence that followed was brutal. Naira felt it then, the collapse of the fantasy she had built herself on. There was no rescue coming, no luxury future waiting behind a signature. She gathered her things angrily, muttering insults that no longer landed, storming out with pride wounded beyond repair. The door slammed, but the sound didn't echo the way she expected. The house absorbed it. Naira walked away, realizing too late that she had mistaken proximity to power for power itself. The divorce didn't arrive as a whisper. It arrived as documentation. Legal notices were filed. Assets were clarified. Boundaries were enforced with the same efficiency Alara had applied to the deal. Benedict received official confirmation while sitting alone in a cafe, the notification lighting up his phone like a verdict he had already anticipated. There was no drama in the wording, no accusations, just facts, timelines, and finality. The marriage was not under review. It was ending. Alara met her legal team that afternoon, reviewing the last procedural steps with steady focus. She did not linger on memories. She did not ask unnecessary questions. Everything had been considered already. When the lawyer asked if she wished to delay for reconciliation options, Ilara answered without pause. No, she said. We are past negotiation. Her voice carried certainty, not bitterness. This wasn't revenge. This was alignment, her life correcting itself. By evening, word had spread quietly through professional circles. Not gossip, clarification. The woman leading the deal was no longer tied to internal instability. Investors appreciated the clean separation. Stability had been restored. Ilara returned home that night, not the old house, but a new space she had chosen deliberately. As she closed the door behind her, she didn't feel loss. She felt completion. Benedict underestimated how loud solitude could be. With Naira gone and Ilara unreachable, the silence in the house pressed in on him relentlessly. No voices to argue with. No praise to feed on. Just reflections in dark windows and unanswered questions echoing back at him. He tried to distract himself with work, but every task reminded him of how much oversight now followed his decisions. Nothing moved forward without approval. Nothing belonged to him outright anymore. He replayed moments in his head, the warnings, the arguments, the way Ilara had stood her ground long before anyone else did. He realized, painfully late, that she had never tried to control him. She had tried to protect him from himself. The difference haunted him. Pride had felt powerful at the time. Now it felt expensive. There were no grand consequences left to unfold. Just gradual diminishment. When he passed the conference building days later and saw Ilara exiting with investors, confident and composed, he didn't approach. He couldn't. She didn't look his way. And that, more than any confrontation, confirmed what he had lost. Ilara stood at the balcony of her new apartment as the city settled into evening, lights flickering on like quiet affirmations. Her phone buzzed with updates, progress reports, confirmations, forward motion. She reviewed them calmly, responding where necessary, delegating where appropriate. Her life had not imploded after confrontation. It had expanded. The fear she once felt at speaking too loudly, pushing too hard, demanding clarity, gone. Replaced by confidence earned, not borrowed. Later that night, she poured herself a glass of water and reflected briefly, not on Benedict, not on Naira, but on herself. On how close she had come to shrinking for the sake of peace. On how expensive silence could have been. She felt no need to announce her victory. The evidence was everywhere, in her autonomy, her authority, her freedom. When Ilara finally laid down to sleep, it was with the knowledge that she had not been calm, because calm was never required. She had been correct. She had been decisive. And when the moment demanded an ending, she had ended things cleanly. Not because she won a deal, but because she refused to lose herself. Please like and subscribe. Your support means the world to us. Thank you for watching to the end. Don't forget to come back for the next amazing tale yet.